Howdy Daydreamer, I'm Dakota, and welcome to Weaving Wands, Episode 3. Went by Walmart with my partner, and we found some yarn that was a little bit on sale, so my partner got me a few balls of yarn yesterday. And the first one I picked out was this Peaches and Cream that they called Psychedelic, because it's almost a rainbow. They went with pink instead of red, but it's close enough to a rainbow. And it's cotton yarn, so it's probably gonna get made into washcloth, so it's gonna get washed out anyways a little bit. And I did mainly pick this one because it was cotton, and I'm wanting some new washcloths and to test out a washcloth pattern, because there's a specific way I've been making them that I'd really like to write out. And then I picked up one of probably my oldest favorite yarns, the Bernay Baby Sport with the ombre that has all of their colors. And this one became a favorite for me very early on into first playing with string and learning how to knit or crochet or anything, because it is almost 700 yards of acrylic. And usually, through most of the economic times I've been through anyway, it stays at about $1 per 100 yards, roughly. There's variance on it, but roughly it's been sort of consistent. And then it's also a lightweight yarn, or number 3, as opposed to Red Heart, which is usually a number 4. So, considering the fact I learned how to play with string on red hearts and generally number 4 yarns, I still feel like lightweights last forever because the ball gets smaller, slower, the lighter the yarn is. So it just feels like there's more in it than there is, in addition to it being quite a bit. And then the baby ombre color has all of their baby yarn colors in one ball. The white, the yellow, the green, the lilac, the blue, and even the pink. And I really, really like that for donating to children's hospitals, because when I was a kid and I would get something that was standard issue or just an item that was available for everybody and it had a little bit of everybody's colors in it, it just felt more like it was meant for all of us, you know? And I try to hold on to that as I grow up and remember to send back something for all of them. And in a very similar strain, I finished up my string haul with a Mainstays acrylic in a blue variegated, and also one of them in they call it a purple variegated, but my eyeballs tell me this is a pink variegated. I don't know how many purples it has to have be considered purple, but that's definitely more pinks than purples by my count, at least. And I've been working on this shawl because I realized something. In roughly 21 years of knitting and string work, because I started messing with the yarn when I was 7, and I'm 28 now. 21 years of messing with string. I haven't made anything to keep before. So it's got me a little bit excited, and I have kind of a specific idea of how I want it to come out now. So when I finished the turquoise ball, I moved on to this lilac-y color, and Red Heart actually calls this one light jasmine. I'm noticing that the colors and the names of colors can be a little surprising sometimes. Um, but I have in my head that I'm gonna finish out the last repetition of the pattern with this, and then do the border in a gray heather. And so far, I've made it to row 35 out of 39 on that last repetition of the pattern cycle. So what I think I'm gonna do is I already have the gray rolled up and ready to go. And I'm just gonna tie it onto the end, and when I finish this repetition of the pattern, I'm just gonna go straight into doing the border with the gray. I'm getting really excited to find out how long it's actually going to be because I'm already having to manually slide the stitches along the needles because there's so many of them, they just kind of crowd up and get stuck together. And I've had to grab a blue set of needle caps because I lost one of the green ones. I was sitting with it, I was holding them, no idea where one of them went. I've looked everywhere, but that's why I got a whole box full of them. So I just grab another pair. Alright, so I was working on it a little bit more last night, and I've made it all the way through the light jasmine and into the gray, and I've started just alternating between building rows and pearl to build up a border because I know I want at least 5 or 6 pearl rows of a border on the bottom of it, and it's starting to feel a little bit like I'm racing a yarn chicken. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break and work on a smaller project for a second. So I grabbed my peaches and cream because I want a washcloth. And while it does have a pattern inside the label, I want to try something a little bit different. So I'm going to save the label and get some 4.5 millimeter knitting needles because that's the recommended size. And today, I'm gonna try to remember how I used to make washcloths long, long ago. Because I didn't have a pattern in front of me. I would just start and end up with a washcloth. And I can remember that I would cast on 3 stitches. And I can remember that I would purl my way back because that's how I would create the little edge that I like to have on washcloths, and it kind of makes all 4 corners match as much as possible for something handmade. Because the fourth corner is always going to be a little bit weird and pointy right after you finish it, just from the gravity of hanging off the needles. This is the part where I feel like I'm gonna have to play with the process to remember how I would do it. Because I know I would grow this part by looping the yarn around the needle and doing yarn overs for the border, but I can't quite remember the order I would do it all in or how many at which point. So I'm going to experiment with that a little bit. But this time I figure the pattern out, I think I'm going to go ahead and write it down. And then even if I don't publish it, I have it written down. But if I decide to publish it, it can help me continue growing and continue creating. So, I think it's time for the patterns to get out of my head and start working with me. I do remember for sure that each row back is a pearl though, because it generates a really good texture with the ridges to like wash with, I feel like. And after doing a couple of rows and honestly frogging it and starting over a time or two, I'm starting to remember the rhythm to it. You knit 1 stitch for the border on each end, and then do a yarn over beside that so that it lines up by the border, and then knit across until you have one left, do your yarn over, knit the other border, and purl back. And we keep doing this until we get the length where we want it, or width, I should say. And then once it's as wide across diagonal as you want it, we switch to the decrease side. But the increase side, you knit one, do your yarn over, knit across until you have one left, and then do your yarn over and knit the other one for the border. I'm pretty sure that that's it, and then you purl back across. And now that I know that, I can go ahead and write that part down, and then when I figure out the other side, write that part down, and then I'll have a pattern made. I usually make my washcloths to the point that one corner to the middle goes from the tip of my finger to the bottom of my hand. And that's because I know that I generally have fairly small hands, and I want to make sure that the washcloths I make are large enough to be comfortably used by anyone who may receive them, or if I keep it for personal use. I just like to make sure that it's large enough to roll up and use for a forehead if I have a fever or a migraine or whatever. And now this side, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of experimentation again to fully remember how it works, but I can remember for sure that it operates by putting a knit two together where we were just doing yarn overs. So that again, along the border, we have a pattern of growth and then a pattern of decreases. But I definitely feel like I'm missing something right now, and I'm not sure what it is. But that's why, when trying to write out a pattern that's been in your head for a long, long time, try to knit it first before you publish it, because if you just follow your own instructions and you're still confused, you've forgotten something. And that's what I'm finding right now. So I'm going to experiment with it. I'm going to play with it. And I think I'm going to go ahead and finish this one how I'm going so I can have a fully finished washcloth to look at and compare to my memory of how they used to come out and try to work out what's missing. And then I'll make a second one and see if that's closer to what I used to get and see if I can't figure this thing out. On the bright side, I named this the yo-yo washcloth long before I could ever even read a pattern because I could never make just one. And trying to always reminded me of trying to drop a yo-yo down just once. It doesn't happen. So it works out, and I enjoy making them. So I'm gonna try and experiment with this a little bit off camera and let y'all know when I figure it out a little bit more. So I finished the first one, and I think I figured out why it felt like I was missing something all of a sudden. Because if I look closely at this edge, I can see that I have lost the border at some point. Like it looks like when I switched from the increase side to the decrease side, I totally forgot to keep the border on it. And if that's the only problem I'm having so far, I'm a lot closer to writing out a pattern than I thought. Let me grab some markers to hold my border in place and try it again. So first I'm going to cast on 3 stitches, purl back across those 3, and then I'm going to do my first yarn over, and on my way back through purling, I'm going to place markers by both edges yarn overs so that I have 1 on each end for the border and 3 in the middle now from increasing on both sides in that first growth row. And then I'm going to repeat the pattern of purl across and increase on both sides next to the markers until I get it to the width I want. And now that I have it up to a decent width, I'm going to use those markers to help me keep the border as I switch over to decreasing. Alright, and then when we're decreasing it, I'm going to need to remember my borders, knit 1, and then bring two together, knit down to the last three of them, bring two of those together, and then knit the last one. So I'm going to knit the one for my border, slide my marker over, and then I'm going to bring two stitches together and knit them at the same time so that I'm reducing the number of stitches by the same amount as we increased them on the other side. And then I'm just going to knit all the way back across to the other end and do the same thing for the other side. But this is where it gets a little bit tricky, kind of. Not really, but there is a little bit of a trick to it, even if it's not tricky, if that makes sense. See, down on this end, we don't really need this marker to be on the last stitch anymore. So when I purl back across doing this side, what I need to try to do is move the marker so that it's three stitches from the end. So that when I'm knitting across while I'm watching something or doing other things, I can feel my marker three stitches from the end, know it's time to bring two together, and then do my border knit and come back across for a purl. And even my reflex trying to explain a pattern on camera is to keep knitting straight because I haven't hit my marker yet. So that's why I'm saying if you're like me, easily distracted, or like to do a lot of other things while you're knitting, it can be a lot easier just to adjust the marker when you're coming back through on the purl and make sure it's three stitches out from the end so that you know it's time to knit two together and do your border knit. And honestly, I'm not even sure how the marker got where it just was, but now that we have it straightened out, let's check out how we do this. And now we can just knit these two together and knit the border stitch and have a completed decrease row. But we only have two stitches behind the marker. So we're going to fix that real quick when we start our next purl row. So we just purl the first two like normal, but then after we get the second one purled and we get back to the marker, we drop it for a second. Just get the marker, you can hold it in another hand, you can sling it to the other side of your table, whatever you gotta do. Just off the needles for a second. Grab a third stitch in the purl row, and then once it has three on your working needle right now, pop that marker back on so that it can hold those for you and purl the rest of the way across. And then it's ready for when we get back to the next row knit-wise on that part. And that's the trick that made it flow a lot faster for me, and it helps me to have a marker on my borders at this point because I forget my borders exist quite often, personally. So for the decrease side, I knit one, do the two yarns together, or two stitches together, knit all the way across to the last three, do two stitches together, and knit one again. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down and work on this a little bit more until it's closer to the end, and then I'll share the trick to the cast off. And while I was trying to remember exactly how those stitches went, I took a second and finished the shawl, but I forgot to turn off or turn on the camera for the cast off. So I took a second to measure it so I could at least tell y'all how long it was. And both of the uh, arm panel sides, whichever you want to call it, wings of the shawl are 24 inches, and the center or back part is 48 inches. So it is very long. It's long enough to wrap around and use as a blanket as well. And I'm loving it so, so much. And my favorite part is that in addition to being warm and having fun colors in it and all, it also tells a story because the main ball that I started with is one that I had gotten believing in myself that I would eventually pick up the needles and start knitting again. That when I was ready, I would come back to the hobby. I trusted myself to take care of my own hobbies and had it tucked away because I believed in me. And then it's also a reminder that when my belief in me starts to run out, I can turn to and ask other people to believe in me too. And they will. That there will always be someone who believes and wants to keep going and trying and see more of what you can do and helps you get there. And I think it's really, really fun to work in stories to the yarn. And I think this is my favorite story so far in the string because it's a story and a hug. And I think that's my favorite thing about making shawls is it can be a hug and a story and so much more all at one time. Because yeah, when you knit, it looks like it's got little holes in between the stitches, but that's space to put love in. 100%. Now, back to the yo-yo washcloth. I've brought you back at the last 5 stitches just because I've noticed that this is where it gets a little tricky if you're using the stitch markers like I do to keep your borders straight. And I wanted to show y'all how I handle that. So first, I'm gonna knit my border stitch, and then I'm just going to drop the next marker. Then I did this sort of dance between the needles where I slid the stitch over, moved the marker out of the way, grabbed the next stitch, and then looped the needle back through the previous one so I could knit those two together. Now, at this point, I ended up with 4 stitches, and I'm honestly not sure how, but I think I probably added or forgot an increase or decrease somewhere or another. And there's a few options for how to resolve it, because you could just knit it regular, purl back, knit the middle two together, and continue, and that would be fine. You could, honestly, there's a lot of other ways. But what I chose to do this time was actually knit it together with the previous stitch so I could get straight to having 3 stitches and share the cast off. So I purled back across with my camera off apparently. Now I always try to cast off my washcloths at the same number of stitches that I started them on, just to make them as square as I can. And the last corner is always going to be pointier than the other 3 until it's washed, just because gravity. But to cast off, I just pretty much knit and then take the previous stitch and loop it over the new one so that there's only 2 stitches on the needle at any given time. And then the last stitch, I'll clip the yarn tail and loop that through to create the first of the knots. Now we have one yo-yo washcloth with nice little laceity openings on the increase side and a smooth, clean edge on the decrease side. And for now, the final corner is really stretched out from the weight of gravity, but it does even out when it's washed, and it's a great ridged pattern for most washing applications, I feel like. I really enjoy it, and I've already tested the first one I made trying to remember the pattern. And even though it's still drying a little bit, it does show how the corners do even out a lot more after it's settled from being worked and gravity and all. And I'm very, very excited to announce that this pattern is available in my Ravelry store. Now, honestly, I'm not quite sure how I set this up. I ended up Googling how to set it up, and the Google AI gave me links to the pages, and that's how I did it, honestly. But Dakota Daydreams is now also a Ravelry pattern store, and my very first pattern is already available, and a link will be down below in the description if y'all want to grab your own copy so you can print it out and keep it in your yarn bag or what have you. Add it to your pattern book. And as I'm writing patterns, I've wanted to write pattern levels to go with patterns because I knit in a completely different style, so I want there to be some sort of distinction for how complicated it is. So a level 1 pattern is going to be no abbreviations and pretty common use stitches that you're going to see in just about everything. Level 2 patterns are going to have some abbreviations and maybe some oddball stitches that you don't see so often, but they're still known about. Level 3 patterns are going to be written either fully abbreviated or they're going to have a stitch that's pretty much made up to go with the pattern, if that makes sense. And then level 4 is going to be high detail, multiple colors, or low repetitions. So patterns that are very long, complicated, or involve cabling or color work. And then level 5 is either lace or something that looks like it by the time you're done with it. So that's generally what I'm thinking of when I'm writing in pattern levels. And if anyone has any suggestions or questions about that, please let me know in the comments below. So I've gotten all of that done while wearing my shawl, and I've been wearing it since it got out of the dryer because it's awesome in a lot of ways, but one of the main ones being that it keeps me from catching a chill when I'm trying to do anything without a blanket on. And it's got me thinking. And what I realized was I don't think I've ever seen a kid's shawl before. So I grabbed that lightweight baby yarn and some knitting needles that I think are 4 millimeters to go with it. And I'm trying to make one. And for now, I'm just going to try to scale down the shawl that I just made, but without using the pattern counter, just sort of freehand style. And I'm going to see what size I can find that would work for a smaller children's shawl that kids could have on while they want to like sit up in color while they're not feeling well. So that'll be our project for next week. Thank you for dreaming with me. I really appreciate everyone who comes by and leaves a comment or taps the like button because it helps me get the message out that we can all spread the love and joy with our own hands. And the comments especially really help overcome cycles of negativity that have seeped into my brain and help me keep going and keep my energy up. So thank you all. Take care of yourself and keep your head in the clouds.